right, George, how do you feel about these ADR clauses?
Well, they're a mouthful for most people, so let's sort of start with the basics because we're trying to pronounce it all right. Multi-tier dispute resolution provisions. They sound rather mysterious. They're not. It's basically an effort, a good faith effort by the parties to try to resolve a dispute in a way which doesn't engage the formal dispute resolution mechanism.
Why do I have to go through these pit stops, as you call them, to resolve a dispute as opposed to having a straight shot?
The answer is simple in the sense that it will depend on what the parties have agreed. And if they have agreed to this mechanism, then it will be required to go through those steps. Usually, you'll have to go through them. And if you don't, it will complicate the process and create problems in terms of the resolution of the dispute.
So they say that ADR and the various mechanisms of pit stops is an efficient method of resolving disputes. Do you think that is the case?
Generally speaking, not. If the parties are at a stage where they have a real disagreement, sometimes, not always, but sometimes the worst thing you can do is force them to try to resolve it in a friendly manner.
In respect to dispute boards, doesn't that then also present a challenge in itself in terms of enforceability?
On this one, perhaps I'm going to swim against the currency of orthodoxy and suggest that I don't like them. I'm talking about dispute boards because there's a little bit of history to them. The DRBs, the dispute resolution boards, which predated the DABs and the DAABs, provided recommendations, not these creatures which are binding on an interim basis and not final and binding until later. I mean, what's that mean? Recommendations issued by the DABs, are they always followed? I think it's somewhere between sometimes and most of the time. Directions that are issued are, again, sometimes, and depending if they're entities or individuals, it's sometimes, and that to me is hardly a ringing endorsement of the process. I think incorrect to suggest that DABs and DAABs are a panacea and they are a solution to all problems on large projects. I don't agree.
In your experience, have you found them to reduce the actual formal dispute process to arbitration, for example?
Two kinds of problems. The first is with respect to cost. Because on large projects, going through a DAB process is like a mini art. It's turned in. I mean, people will blame the lawyers for being involved, but it's a fact of life. We leave it all to the engineers. They're not going to do it any better. And you go through the process, and it's extremely complex and costly. You get through that process, and inevitably what happens? One of the two parties not going to be happy with the outcome, so they issue a notice of dispute. And then you get to actually go to the formal dispute resolution mechanism, where you get to do it all over again. So you now have incurred the cost of the dispute board process. You end up with this beast, this hydra of a decision, which binding but not final. Once we get through that all out of our system, we then get to the formal dispute, and we get to do it all over again. And that process is de novo, which means that nothing that the DAB has said before is binding at all. The tribunal can basically, with respect to the issues, not new issues, with respect to the issues that were put to DAB, they get to do it all over again. Well, if that's not the model of inefficiency, I don't know what is.
Clearly have a problem with the over-prescription of these mechanisms. How do you get around dealing with those mechanisms when you're advising your clients?
Simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. And that's incorporated in a very sophisticated rule called the KISS rule. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm come over and kiss you. It means keep it simple, stupid. The KISS rule requires not artificial intelligence. It requires human intelligence to focus on what's important, to exercise human judgment that reflects the risks on the actual project.